Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 125,000 bonus miles for a limited time through October 29th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends October 29th, 2025.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome to the Recruiting Book Club. I'm Carmen Hudson, recruiting consultant and former TA leader and book author. With each episode of this podcast, I have invited a guest who's written a book about recruiting, sourcing, or TA leadership. I like to read each book before the interview, and that makes our conversations rich and useful. And sometimes we veer off the topic of the actual book and we get into TA issues. So I hope that makes it interesting and useful to you. Please let me know what you think. Or if you have a favorite TA book, I'll add it to my list of folks to be interviewed. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Welcome to the Recruiting Book Club. So excited to have Gerry Crispin. I'm going to allow Gerry to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about what he's done and his accomplishments. Then we're going to dive right into his series of books that he wrote a very long time ago, and I am proud to call him my friend, so I will turn it over to you, and then we'll just have a great conversation about the books that you've written and your influence on this industry.
Okay, whatever you like to do, I'm all for it.
Tell us a little bit about how you got started and what you did earlier in your career, and then how that led you to CareerXroads.
You know, the short version of a very long story, I've been working in recruiting consistently for probably 53 years. You know, I when I graduated from Stevens in 1969, I was, an engineer, my Bachelor of Engineering. Very, very proud of that, but hated the types of jobs I was being offered. I had a job for a sales engineer at Train, and I had a paint engineer at Ford.
Wow.
And I just could not picture me doing that kind of work. And a professor came to me because I was very active in college. I was editor of the school paper and a whole variety of other kinds of things that I did. And he pitched me on human resources. But he talked about it as a science, management science, and how this graduate program in industrial organizational psychology was going to, change everything. So long story short, I took that road because it just was a lot more exciting and interesting. And I was very poorly prepared for that. I had to learn psychology, which I'd never had a course in. I taught it for 3 years, but I needed a better job because I was starting to get married and have a kid and stuff. So I took on a job as the director of career planning and placement and services kind of thing at Stevens. So it gave me more money, but it suddenly created in me a fascination with the whole idea of recruiting. Because I'm helping these kids get jobs, and
Right.
Most of them are getting 3, 4, 5, 6 offers because they're engineers.
Right.
But they're absolutely clueless. And, the first time, they start looking at something else, they don't know what, they don't know why, they don't know anything. So there's a lot of long stories, but I'm gonna shorten it. I learned a lot about myself, started getting heavily involved in trying to understand how this crossroads of us thinking about careers and jobs and how jobs are aligned to careers and careers are aligned to your life and all of that kind of stuff. And there wasn't much about that in the 1970s. There really was not many of those kinds of books. There was a guy named Richard Bowles who wrote What Color is Your Parachute?
That's it. Yep.
That I got to know. He became a lifelong friend. He passed a few years ago. So I did that for I got involved for about 6 years in graduate school and everything else. Fascinated, finally decided, oh, got to go get a job. And I went to work for Johnson and Johnson. A lot of stories there. I was
I
a
bet.
loose cannon. There was nobody who had a beard when I went there, and I've had this beard since 1968.
Since you were 3.
Yeah, so I was a little bit of an odd man out, but I had some mentors. I was very privileged in the sense that there were people who liked what I was about and what I did. So I had lots of opportunity to do many things at Johnson and Johnson, many of which had to do with recruiting. So again, many stories there. But after 10 years of that, I decided, oh my God, I need to go find another way to make a difference. Went to a company called Olin Hunt Chemical that after a year fired me because they wanted me to let go someone that I didn't think we should be letting her go. She was the only woman. She was the highest performer. She was close to the highest paid, but not the highest paid. She had the most tenure. And the director thought we should let her go because her husband had a good job.
Wow. Wow.
That kind of paternal thinking, I'm going, no, we can't do that. What kind of a message are we sending to people
Right.
in our company if we let the best performer go because her husband has a good job?
Right.
First of all, there's a bias on gender. There's a bias against performance. Give me a break. I'm not doing that. And so the next day, my boss came in and said, I have to let one person go, and you're the last one we hired. So I went home, told my wife, I said, I always wonder what would happen if push came to shove. Now I know. So I worked as a contract recruiter for Roche. I worked for a year as in executive search, first as a researcher, and then as someone who was tracking down, sourcing, if you will, characters, and then obviously getting up to bat and doing stuff. And then I guess I said, I got to try something new. This executive search stuff is just, it's too one-sided. So I joined a recruitment advertising firm, Shaker Advertising.
Right.
In 6 months, I learned everything there was to know about how to do that, and was given a set of keys from Chicago, drove a car back to New York, and started that business on Shaker on the East Coast. And that was about 10 years. But along the way, the 90s came.
Right.
And I see this thing called the internet. And just like everybody's talking about AI, but no one seems to be doing anything at a level that's really different. Everybody was talking about the internet, and the best anybody could do is go look at it, and they weren't doing anything with it. They weren't buying anything on it. They were just looking at it and looking at all the possibilities. And I had a chance in 1996 to give a talk for the first time at SHRM, National Conference in Chicago. And and two things happened. One, a fellow that I got to meet or had met at a group of folks looking for jobs that we were trying to help. He and I found that if I went and gave that talk, I could have a book promoted if I had a book.
Right.
So we figured out how to write a book in 1996, because when we tried to get somebody else to do the work, they said, yeah, we would be happy to. McGraw-Hill basically gave us a 40-page contract that said, we will own not only this book, but anything you write for the rest of your life.
Right.
We will give you, after we deduct all of our costs,
right,
we will give you 5 cents on the dollar of any profit left over. And I'm thinking, that doesn't work as a partnership. So we figured out how to write our own book. We paid to have 5,000 copies ready for the 1996 SHRM conference. And I spoke on My subject was HR and the internet.
Mm.
And there were 1,000 people in the room. I said, how many of you have an email? 25% had an email. I said, how many of you have seen a page on the internet? Or maybe I said the World Wide Web or something like that. But, 10% said, yeah. So I pretty much told them that I'm going to show you a couple things that I think are possibilities. And believe me, they were barely possibilities at that moment.
Oh, yeah.
There was a few job boards like OCC, Career Mosaic. Monster Board was just beginning as well, but they really were not elevating themselves at all at that moment in time. But there were little sites that were trying to provide data on compensation and benefits and a bunch of other things, and so we could see some possibilities. And I said, if you don't embrace this, even though it's going to be years before we get there, you're just not going to have a job.
It will run you over.
So get a life here, guys. And then at the end of that day, we had sold all 5,000 copies at Shern, and we had to order more. And over time, we wrote 8 books every year. We sold probably between 250,000 and 350,000 books over the course of those 8 years. And then obviously that became obsolete. We were also trying to find a lab where there were 20 or 30 different computers that were hooked up to the internet so we could teach people how to do this.
Right.
And there was only one in New Jersey, but it was not all that good down in Trenton. But we found that that Cornell University in New York City had a deal with the library across the street, the Scientific Library for the New York Library, and they had a lab with 25 computers hooked to the internet.
Wow.
So the first thing we did in each course was we gave everyone one of these.
What is that?
It says Career Crossroads on it.
Career Crossroads. And is it a thumb? What is that?
It's a clicker.
It's a clicker.
We made them pick it up and click, and then we showed them where the button was to turn the computer on.
Oh, wow. Wow.
These were HR directors, and
that's where we were in 96, 97. That's probably somewhere along the time that I became aware of you. You have to start somewhere.
First thing is, if you can do this, you can recruit on the internet.
That's it. My first job in talent acquisition was because I got to use the internet. I had discovered the internet. I read some article, and a friend of mine had gone to an executive search firm, to Egon Zender. And she called me and said, hey, I know that you enjoy working on the internet. Would you like to work here? I had no idea what an executive search firm did. And I said, do I get to use the internet? And she said, yes. And I said, yes, I would love that job. That's all it took for me.
Think about that today, translating that today. If you could walk in now and say, hey, here's what I've been doing on AI.
That's it.
To increase my speed with which I can handle the research, the whatever, et cetera, the content creation, et cetera, et cetera. Somebody's going to go, oh, yeah, we need you not only to do that, but we need you to help teach others here how to do that themselves, because we all need to be embracing this piece.
That's it. So your first book, was it a version of the Career Crossroads guide, or what was your first book?
The first book was Uglier in Hell. It was 300 websites we could find.
Okay.
We reviewed each one. So there was basically a half page or a page designed for each. And there wasn't much more than that. The one that you just showed, by the time we got to 2000, that was 1996. But by the time we got to 2000, we were reaching out to a dozen of the characters who were kind of emerging as the big speakers and so on, like a John Sullivan and so on. And we would have them write on specific aspects of how you as a candidate might want to change the way you do your resume so that you could fax it, so that you could provide changes in it and actually email it to somebody or whatever. And another set of articles in terms of how you would source or market, or all of the things that we now have specialties for. So we would have like one article about sourcing, one article about recruitment marketing, if you will, and a couple about why this ATS sucks and that ATS doesn't suck as much, and so on. And then we would have more job boards that were resume rich or something else, so that we would rank order them, review them, and sell that as a directory. Everybody had to have one.
It was very interesting to go back and read those writers who appeared at the beginning of the book, like Kevin Wheeler and Karen Ostofsky, Eves, people who are still part of this industry. And it was interesting just to hear some of their predictions for what was happening in the TA industry.
The book that you showed right at the beginning, I think, is I also wrote a foreword, and in that foreword made a whole series of predictions.
You did.
Some of which haven't yet come true.
Some of which have not yet even come true. I actually have a question for you about that. You predicted screening.
Mm-hmm.
And screening has happened, pre-screening of candidates before they are talking to hiring managers through some sort of tool or what have you. My question is, has it been as successful as you imagined? Has it improved recruiting in any way? Are we getting there with the advent of AI? Just seemed to me like a very murky category, one that I didn't even want to step my foot into because it was just too murky. It just wasn't clear the benefits.
The Use Case podcast is where technology vendors get to talk about themselves. And it's a wonderful place for vendors, investors, and practitioners to listen to the story of the solution, the features, the benefits, the attributes, etc. And we get to know the CEO or founder during the call, and we also get to know the tech. So subscribe to the Use Case podcast.
Hi, I'm Stephen Rothberg.
And I'm Jeanette Leeds.
And together, we're the co-hosts of the High Volume Hiring Podcast.
Are you involved in hiring dozens or even hundreds of employees a year? If so, you know that the typical sourcing tools, tactics, and strategies, they just don't scale.
Yeah. Our bi-weekly podcast features news, tips, case studies, and interviews with the world's leading experts about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to high-volume hiring.
Make sure to subscribe today.
Yeah, the benefits of screening, pre-screening, if you will. Yeah, because we put too much on the employer making a case, if you will, for why we should go forward. And the fact of the matter is that pre-screening really is exceptionally good when it's obvious that you, in sort of a 0 and 1 kind of thing, do you have a driver's license? Yes or no?
Right.
Yes, we go forward. No, we don't. If you say no, thank you very much, but you need this.
Right.
You must be a U.S. citizen for this job by law. Are you a U.S. citizen? So it's not my judgment. It literally is whether or not there's a knockout factor that's part of this job. And if it's legitimate, then it's fine, and you just move on. Thank you very much. When you are a U.S. citizen, please come back. We want to hire you.
We've tried to take it beyond that, though. We've tried to get
way beyond that.
Way beyond that, to whether or not someone has the skills to do the job.
But the pre-screening gets to be in an automated fashion because you're loaded. If you've got 20, 30 different jobs to fill, and now you're supposed to be pre-screening all of those people who've said they're interested in all of those jobs, what kind of bullshit does it settle down to? It gets kind of sketchy, right?
It does.
Because now you're going to be parsing the data that came in, which is bad data. It's their best foot forward in terms of filling out the application. So you're looking for multiple mentions of the application that you think is going to be the most important application you're going to use in the future job, but they didn't necessarily know that. So you're going to miss all those people who actually can do that work, but don't mention it enough or use a different word. And then and forget the fact that we're going to be using AI to do the same bullshit. But the point is that kind of screening is not that good. If you're going to have a formal interview with each and every candidate, that's different. But who in their right mind is going to be able to do that if there were 50 people applying to 20 different jobs you're responsible for? You're not interviewing 1,000 people.
Well, we're at the stage now where the candidates have figured out how to game this. And so now all of these screening systems are, they're at the whim of a candidate who may have decided, I'm going to get this person to take my screen for me. Then I show up as a different person, but all of these background questions have been answered.
Then there's a workaround for the employer, and then there's a workaround for the workaround for the candidate, and so on.
Right.
The reality is, if you are perfectly aligned to taking 10 people, let's say, and committing to an interview with each of them, then if you've had sufficient training as a recruiter in giving interviews, not that you've just given a lot of interviews, but that you've had good training on how to do an interview properly, then from a behaviorally based point of view, you should be capable of asking 20,000-foot questions and keep probing down to the trench level to determine whether that individual, in fact, is the individual that's going to show up, and that they have all of the capabilities that you're looking for. But that does take training. It takes a little bit of creativity. So there is some art, but it's not 90% art. There's a lot of science involved in doing that properly. And I will tell you that that's not screening. That is doing a quality job on an assessment that is run by a human being, the recruiter. And obviously, if you can do that in combination with other assessments that may help demonstrate certain skills to certain levels, then there's a whole different set of issues there.
Just in thinking about this recently, I am thinking that we might likely return to something that we saw in the 70s, which are job assessment, job screening centers, where you show up somewhere and you're being tested and perhaps even slightly interviewed, but you have to prove that you are who you are. And you have to go through this series of tests.
That's one of the ways.
Mm-hmm.
And there probably are certain jobs that we want to do that for. I think there are other ways that we can demonstrate that the person who's being assessed or whatever.
It's amazing that this is the level that we have to think about. Yes.
And we might make it conditional that once you show up and we have you physically in place, that you demonstrate again your ability to do the things that we're hiring you for, that you have committed that you have, and we have give you a project. I will tell you that in China, there is a primary contract of a year, 2 years, and 3 years. And once you come to work, you have the employer and the candidate have 1 month for the 1 year, 2 months for the 2 years, and 3 months for the 3 years to go through a set of onboarding capabilities and projects that demonstrate what we believe you had as an employer and what you claim to have had as a candidate. And it's no fault. So anytime in that month, I could say, it's not working out. Goodbye. Or either one.
It's interesting. So what did you learn from looking at all these websites, from rating them, from going back and forth with the developers of these websites? What has it taught you about recruiting, about finding talent, about assessing talent?
That the industry and the profession really is built on a couple flawed things. One, we don't have any standards that we can all agree on. That there's still a lot of cowboy Wild West kind of things going on, and continue to, and they get reinforced by the technology. I learned that the technology is more driving the practice than the practice is driving the technology.
Give me an example of a parallel industry where this kind of acknowledgement that there are standards exists, and how might TA look different?
Almost anyone, engineering, finance, accounting, et cetera. There are accounting standards. When we say cost accountant, or when we talk about, EBITDA, or when we talk about something, everybody knows what that means precisely.
Mm-hmm.
If you say something like quality of hire, you're
I'm
going to
sorry,
get
it's just
an
such a
argument
funny
for the
joke.
next
But
2
it's so
months.
true. It's so true.
Until people stop talking about quality of hire for at least 6 months, and then it will re-enter the whatever. Take something even that less. What is how do we measure time to fill?
Right.
15 different ways. Cost per hire.
Right.
And you name anything, and you would have to go through a process to determine or get agreement inside your own company on what that means, and what decisions it would affect, and what other measures might have influence on that. So there's no formula that says, we want to look at these 3 different measures and balance them in kind. And then the question would be, because we know the answers to this, how do you come to a point where you say, oh, this person is best over that person, and I believe they will perform better and last longer? What is embedded in your employer organization to collect the data and follow it for the next year, 2 years, 6 months, year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, that proves your point statistically, that you, in your wisdom of having, along with the hiring manager, that the 2 of you have figured out who you should hire and who you should not hire. And how right are you? Well, if you ask a recruiter, they believe in their intuition. I'm very consistent in how I do this and that and the other thing. But if you asked 2 recruiters to interview the same person for the same job based on the same sets of data and hiring managers, and you gave each of them 5 people to interview, I can assure you they will not agree on who should be hired.
There will likely be some disagreement. At Recruiting Toolbox, we tried very hard to get hiring managers and companies and recruiters to set some standards before the interviews, because typically what happens is those standards get set after the fact, and that could be just any kind of hot mess that you imagine it to be.
But I am convinced that training without accountability is just a nice thing.
And you go back into organizations and, that training has worked in some parts of the organization and has not shown up in other parts. So it's very, very difficult.
So here's the thing. That's why standards are going to be important. They're not, the be all and the end all, because just as you said, you work hard to try to establish within the context of the training a set of agreements that this is the way we're going to do it consistently, so that we can be fair, so that we can defend what we're doing, and so that we have the best chance of hiring at least someone, maybe not the best person, but close. What is the best? Obviously, if they last long enough to make a difference, and they are passionate about what they're doing and they perform well, then there's a lot of people who might be able to do that if they're motivated.
We could go down that rabbit hole for another hour or so.
I will tell you, there's half the decision is missing, though. Do not have a set of standards about what we need to help the candidate learn about us. Because the candidates, we rely on the candidates being smart enough to ask us reasonable questions, but they don't necessarily have a lot of experience in terms of aligning their jobs and careers in life. And some of them are frightened that if they ask those questions, they will be rejected. So, if I wanted to ask you, how many people that look like me have you hired in the last 5 years, and where are they now? That might be an awkward question for some people.
That's not a question that most candidates will ask, right? And were they to ask, they might meet exactly what they think they might meet. So
I would, if I'm a woman coming into an engineering position, I might like to know how many women have been here before me, or how many women are here currently, and how have they fared? And maybe I'd like to talk to one or two of them.
Exactly. I want to talk about our spend. So in this book that was published in 2000, you said that there was a $300 billion spend on recruiting tools.
Did I say 300 billion?
That's what you said, if I'm
Then I
not
would have
mistaken.
qualified it, or I should have.
By the year 2003, months later, to an estimated $300 billion investment.
Reasonably bullshit. First of all, it takes into account the amount of money you're paying, not just to hire someone, but that you're paying them. So if I'm an RPO, or if I'm a staffing organization doing part-time work, I am collecting the money in some cases for the people that are doing the work. And so that
Gotcha.
money, that pay, is included in that 300 billion. So I would tell you that in the year 2000, we spent the most money we ever spent on Sunday Help Wanted advertising, and that was $10 billion. But that's still a lot of money to put ads in the Sunday section of a newspaper in 50 to 60 different cities around the United States. It's a lot of money. The next year, 2001, it had been reduced to 5 billion, because the money by 2000 was now shifting to Monster Board and to other resources on the internet. People were now paying for things like ATSs that cost them a lot of money. If we advance that to today in terms of a spend, that ATS isn't the only thing you've got. You've got a CRM, you've got something else on top of the ATS because it doesn't search well enough. It doesn't, we're now integrating dozens of technologies. Now you could probably talk about, 50 to 100 billion easy.
It's not, at least what I could find using ChatGPT, it's not quite at that rate currently, but it does seem like there has been a drop in what we spend.
Oh, you mean
recently?
recently?
We're spending so much more on tools. Yeah, very recently.
I think that there is a drop based on the drop in number of recruiters. So I would look at whatever that percentage drop is, it's going to be related to the percentage drop in the number of recruiters in large companies. There's been an outflow the last year or so. That means less seats at LinkedIn. That means fewer easy hire contracts. It means fewer jobs in a job board, whatever it might be. So
tonight on NBC, Jimmy Fallon and Bozeman St. John host the incredible new competition show.
I hired 10 creatives from all walks of life. They will be battling it out to see who can impress the world's biggest brands.
This is a huge opportunity.
This is the battle for the next big idea.
This is not play.
We're spending millions of dollars. I'm so excited to embark on this adventure with all of you.
May the best idea win!
On Brand with Jimmy Fallon, tonight on NBC.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Exactly. So why didn't job boards fare? In 2000, this book is thick and filled with all the different job boards. And, we see the emergence of Career Builder and Monster, and eventually we see tools like Indeed, but they don't seem to be doing very well in this market. What did they miss?
Here's my take on it. I'm sure we'd get a different take if we were talking to Peter Weddle or some of the others. But here's what's happened, I think, over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, we had 3,000 different job boards that people were actually going to and using. but now they're behind the scenes. So Indeed still collects data from lots of job boards. There's deals behind the scenes of the job boards as to what jobs they get that they share and with whom and for how much. So there's an undercurrent of how that money gets displayed, but the people who are in front of it are folks like Indeed, who spend a shitload of money, obviously, in terms of being in front of you, ZipRecruiter, and you can think of, probably half a dozen more that are easy to come up with, and a few specialty ones that a company says, oh yeah, we've got to do that one. But with programmatic, with a whole variety of other things that are tools, you can bet that your job is being shopped to various places so that you'll get the most bang for your buck when you work with one or more of these different groups.
That's it. I got tied up into that world.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. You know that there's a whole different way of making money as a job board, besides trying to reach out to each and every employer.
That's it. 1,000%. What is the future? We've got AI. Candidates now at least know, if they know of an employer, they can find that website and find the jobs. But they may not know all employers. What's the future of job boards? Where do we see them? Or is there some other kind of exchange that you can imagine?
Well, I think there are many more exchanges going on right now. So we don't normally think of TikTok or, Instagram or, Facebook or any one of these social media sites as mechanisms, if you will, for driving somebody to our website to apply. But even if you're talking about subtleties relative to not talking about the job, but talking about the kind of company that it's in, or any of the other ways in which we might want to get awareness to the candidate population, that's the equivalent of a job board, where we're basically finding more and more channels, dozens of channels. And with the help of AI and other tools that are now available, we can pinpoint with much more clarity which channels might reach which constituents or prospects. And I think one of the biggest things we're going to have to think about is where in their journey are we reaching them? I mean, the leaders at the top of your funnel, if you will, the CEO, et cetera, they want you to reach somebody who can do the job tomorrow, right?
That has always been the dream, right?
They find them today, hire them today, they come to work tomorrow, and they are going to be up and running tomorrow. We're not doing anything to onboard them. They just, work. So that would be, right, the extreme, left of this, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, we're thinking in terms of, well, what if we can't afford that price? We want to hire them one level below that. Teach them, get a chance to get their sense of how good they're going to perform. And those that continue to perform will elevate them to the next level and give them the skills and knowledge internally to accomplish that. And by the way, that's also enhances diversity of some underrepresented groups. Okay, that's a strategy. And a lot of companies try to build around that strategy. But we're going to start thinking about where do they start? Do we hire high school graduates? If you do, then maybe you should be thinking about where they are in high school and what kind of local ways are they learning, because they're not learning the same things from the same places that you do. Are they going to go to college? Is college going to be relevant? How is college shifting over the next few years? Right now, Right now, college, if you look in at any college, the average is 43% men, 57% women.
Mhm.
And women are 8% more likely to graduate. So we have a trend going on in college that is changing the demographics of what's available, which might be good, might not be good. I mean, but it's something we're going to have to think about. And fewer people are going to college because they're going, I can learn differently.
What you're saying, though, it still concerns me because I don't think that that what you're describing is a way to get to the talent faster. I'd love to be able to hire within a few days.
You do, but we're not going to be able to in some of the critical components and skills that we're looking for. We're going to have to give them to those folks. We will become the educators in some of the instances. I will tell you, Polaris, which makes Indian motorcycles and a whole bunch of ATVs and stuff like that, they have a huge manufacturing facility near the Canadian border, and they cannot get enough people to go there and do the work from an assembly line work because it's got technology components. It's complicated. In the past, they weren't paying as much. They were paying, I don't know, $15, $16 an hour. And they're experimenting with a whole new project right now where they've got a couple dozen kids graduating from high school that they're going to pay $21 an hour to. They're going to move them to this facility and give them a condo. Then they're going to train them 1 day a week with internal help, and they're going to enroll them in a 2-year program in college, all with the intent of getting more tenure and performance out of a core group of folks that they need in order to manufacture the next generation of quality products. This is not finding people who can do it. This is creating the talent pool from scratch, and that investment is going to cost millions of dollars.
Oh, absolutely. In talking about AI and talking about doing something like this, I still don't feel the improvement to actually acquiring talent that I think I should see after my being in this business 30 years plus, and your being in this business even longer. Time to fill is still not remarkably improved.
The only way to deal with time to fill, you've got to have a great message. You were talking about the marketing, the employment branding and those kinds of things are going to be critical. So, but they have to be authentic, clearly, and not everybody has an authentic, a good brand. Let's put it this way:
message or voice.
Everybody's got something that they can offer, but there are companies that, by and large, are hiding some of the stuff that they're offering, which is lousy managers and a bunch of other stuff. So let's assume that you're a progressive quality company. You've got a great message. You can drive people to your website with your messages, right? And your branding. You know where the candidates are, however few or more there are. So you've done your research. You know how to source from that perspective and get in front of those folks, and you've got a great message. So you drive people to your website to express interest. The only way that we're going to change the dollars, the time, and the way in which we treat them, okay, is when they're looking. So I'll give you the example that I've done before is when they're looking at this opportunity that you offer, there needs to be someone that looks like me, let's just say, or whatever. In fact, maybe it knows who it should look like, right? and it pops up and says, "Hi, Carmen, I see that you're looking at this particular job. And I want you to know that I love the fact that you're doing some due diligence to research who we are and what we're doing. I certainly can answer any questions, but please continue, exploring. And I just want you to know that if you decide that you want to be interested in competing for this job, number one, all you have to do is click the button that says I'm interested. You do not have to give me your resume. You do not have to fill out a long application, because right now there's 223 people who've indicated an interest. And by tomorrow afternoon, I think we'll probably have about 400. And at that point, I'm going to close that job over. So just do it in the next day or so. Then I'm going to let you know that you can set up an appointment with me to be interviewed anytime in the next 48, 72 hours at your convenience, because I'm not human. I'm a little bit of an entity, but I'm actually pretty skilled. I can speak a number of different languages, and I also know sign language. And what I'm going to do is ask each person who has indicated interest. Everyone's going to have the same opportunity. Everyone will be able to talk to me. And here's what I can do. I'm going to ask everybody the same question or questions. However, I also know how to probe those questions. So I may ask different questions when I hear from you, what your role is, what you did, how you accomplished that. So you need to be prepared to have a good, long conversation with me. So we'll put aside at least an hour, if not more. It might be less, but, I want to be able to give you the opportunity to tell me everything you think is important for you to be able to compete for this job. But at the same time, I need to be able to ask the same questions to be fair for everyone. And then I'm going to organize that information in a way that the humans can figure out who they're going to go forward with. And once they do that, if you'd like, I'd be happy to come back and share with you some of the reasons why you're going forward or not going forward, so that you can use that to compete for a similar job in the future, or maybe a different job that we might have open for you. We can have that discussion later on, though.
I love this. How long will it take us to get there?
I would love to say 6 months. But then 20 years from now, you and I are going to have another conversation. We're talking about this. I'd say 5 years. And the reason why I say 5 years is because I think at the beginning of this, I said I just went to a lecture at my college, Stevens Institute of Technology. Remember, I'm an engineer. And the head of research of IBM, who has 3,000 scientists and engineers working for him all over the world to improve, computing, it just blew my mind, talking about, how we're going to have chips that now have 1 trillion transistors on them. But there is a problem, and the problem is that all of these transistors use a huge amount of energy, and that's growing at an exponential rate, so much so that there's going to be a limit to how much computing can go forward unless we find more efficient ways of doing that. And one of those efficient ways is quantum computing, which I thought was still mythological. But apparently IBM already has 80 of them working. And when the explanation came down as to how they work, I'm going, we have just moved into the world of magic. I'm telling you.
We don't know how much magic is in front of us.
There's magic involved in this in terms of quantum computing that I learned in college that I still don't understand. So, I find this fascinating shit. But I do think we are making breakthroughs so quickly now in medicine, in everything around us, that there's no way we don't evolve very, very quickly. And the question I would have is, do we have the capacity as humans to actually keep up?
We will. I think we will experience a drop-off in things that we are so used to doing and spending our time on, and we will be able to apply our time
I hope you're right.
different ways and support different things. I hope so. I would like to ask one last question, and that is, would you consider writing another book? And if so, what would it be about?
Yes, I would consider writing another book. I won't. If somebody were to spend, a few days with me, picking my brain or whatever over one thing that I'm fascinated with, I would definitely do it. And really, it's the fact that for the last decade or so, I've taken people every year to a different country to study really how people are treated as employees and as candidates in those countries. So we've been to India and China and Brazil, Czech Republic, Hungary, Singapore, Japan. We were the first delegation to go to, and I'm usually taking about 20 people, along with China Gorman, who is the former COO of SHRM. And we were the first delegation in HR to go to Cuba in 60 years. And our first meeting was with the Minister of Propaganda. So I have memories and stories about different ways that these cultures interact with employees and candidates that are not the same way that we look at anything in this country. Not in terms of diversity, not in terms of performance, not in terms of what the outcome of a business is, not even the definition of what a successful business is. It's all different, and it influences how people look at the whole concept of work. In terms of a job, their career, and their life, and I think we would all benefit by appreciating, if you will, that incredible diversity of thought in what work is all about and why we do it.
Well, I am going to invite any listener out there who's interested in writing a book to jump right on top of this, because I think it would be a very interesting project. I can't take it on, but
I can wait for you. I'm going to be around a long time. You know that, right? I need another 75 years in order to get this done.
That's it. We'll be pumping the AI juice into you. So that is fantastic. So I love having this conversation. I loved hearing about the history. I love talking about the future. So I appreciate you for being able to do both of those things.
And I appreciate you. It's always fun.
Always fun. Thank you. Thank you for appearing on the Recruiting Book Club. And I reserve my right to invite you back. Thanks.
Every minute your finance team spends wrestling with data is a minute lost. Insight Software's AI-powered insights instantly move you from complexity to clarity. Automated analysis, real-time reporting, strategic recommendations, all at your fingertips. Transform how your finance team works and watch your business grow. Stop wasting time. Start making smarter decisions. Learn more at insightsoftware.com/AI.